morning again, everyone. My name is Roy Wadia. I'm the Communications Advisor for Unfpa Asia Pacific. And it's really wonderful to have you all here this morning. A few more people will be trickling in, hopefully. But I think we should start. This is the State of the World Population Report launch for Asia and the Pacific. The global launch happened actually yesterday, but there was a conflicting event in town, so we had to shift ours to Friday. Having said that, this is our flagship publication of the year. I think for the last several years we haven't really observed it here. So this is the first observation after several years. And this year's theme is, as you can see over there, mainly about humanitarian response, especially for women, girls, and young people. And when we were trying to come up with the idea for this event, we wondered whether we should do what we always do, which is talk about women and girls in a more narrow way in terms of sexual and reproductive health, or we should do something a little bit different. And Yoriko, who's our new regional director, said, why don't we talk about young people at the heart of humanitarian work? And to be frank, this is something that we've been doing piecemeal in some countries more than others. And we said, let's not just focus on UNFPA itself and brand ourselves and, rah, 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 but let's actually talk about the issues and young people themselves and hear from them in their own voices with their own stories. So with the help of our country officers, we have a panel of young people here, and we'll have a sort of talk show format discussion shortly. We also wanted to partner with the government of Australia, which is one of our biggest partners and donors, and they very kindly acquiesced. And so we have the ambassador himself, Paul Robillard, over here with us, and we thank you. And so without any further ado, let's start the event. I would like to call upon our regional director, Yoriko Yasukawa, who's just been with us for the last 3 or 4 months, to come and give her keynote address. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to have you all in this launch of the 2015 State of the World's Population Report. And first of all, our heartfelt thanks to Ambassador Robillard and his colleagues at the Australian Embassy, especially Richard Lee and Eleanor Culpit, for their collaboration in the organization of this event. And Ambassador Robillard, thank you very much for being with us this morning. And we're also very pleased and excited to have these young people with us today to share their experiences on working with us to attend to the needs of women and other young people in humanitarian situations. The central message of this year's report, which is called Shelter from the Storm, is that these crisis situations, whether caused by natural phenomena like earthquakes or cyclones or droughts, or by man-made conflict, in these situations, women and girls are especially vulnerable and disproportionately affected. And so specific measures need to be taken to protect women and girls always as part of humanitarian response. And the report also calls on us for more investment in prevention and preparedness and in long-term development that are development efforts that are inclusive and that are sustainable. To give you an idea of where we are now, the number of natural disasters tripled between 1980 and the year 2000. Over the last 20 years, there have been an average of 340 disasters per year, affecting 200 million people annually. taking an average of 67,500 lives a year. And after the Second World War, the number of international wars declined drastically, but the number of internal armed conflicts have gone up, and with that, the number of civilian deaths. Today, 1 billion people live in areas of conflict, and on average, nearly 170,000 people die each year as a direct result of conflict. And of the 100 million people in need of humanitarian assistance in 2015, 1/4 were women and adolescent girls of reproductive age. And since these numbers are so mind-numbingly large and make it really difficult for us to imagine what it means for the individual human being to be part of a humanitarian disaster, let's look at some examples of the kinds of situations you could find yourself in. For example, imagine being 9 months pregnant and you start having contractions, but gunfire in your village has cut you off from neighbors, from family, from friends, and healthcare, so you deliver by yourself. Or you are a teenage girl in a camp of displaced people. You go outside to a washroom at night, and a man attacks you. And you have nowhere to go, no one to ask for help. That is why Unfpa focuses its humanitarian assistance on life-saving sexual and reproductive health services. For example, after this year's Nepal earthquake, we distributed almost 60,000 dignity kits to women and girls. These kits include supplies like sanitary napkins, clothes, flashlights, so that women can go out at night and be safer. We also established 80 maternity units and distributed over 1,254 reproductive health kits to hospitals and facilities to help pregnant women give birth safely and to protect new mothers and their infants. In all, this has benefited over 1 million people. We established 15 female-friendly spaces in the hardest hit districts, providing protection from gender-based violence, psychosocial counseling, and other related services to over 42,000 affected women and adolescent girls. And we're able to do this thanks to partners who share our concern for women and girls in humanitarian situations, like the Australian government. For those of us who live privileged lives, I think that's the case with most of us here, it's really difficult to imagine what it's like to confront circumstances like these. But the report challenges us to exercise our imaginations and our empathy and to put ourselves in the lives of these women and young girls. And think about what needs to be done, both to better attend to their immediate needs as well as to prevent these situations from happening in the first place. And speaking of empathy, it really is great to have these young people here and their work, their experience really is a testament to what it means when you do try to put yourself in the place of other people who are much worse off than you are and try to imagine their situations and to try to do what you can. The report calls for a 4-point agenda for the international community and national governments to exercise that empathy in their policy making. First, to always make sure we meet the sexual and reproductive health needs of women and girls as a normal and regular part of all humanitarian assistance. Second, to step up investments in prevention and preparedness. Today, only 5 cents out of every humanitarian dollar goes to prevention and preparedness. And there's always so much discourse about the importance of prevention, of disaster risk reduction, yet we haven't yet put our money where our mouth is. So that really needs to get done. Third, to pursue development that is inclusive and environmentally sustainable, that builds equality, including gender equality, and respects and protects everyone's rights, including the reproductive rights and the right to sexual health for women and young people. The fourth is to tear down the wall between humanitarian assistance and long-term development. On the one hand, actions to promote equitable development that benefit women, men, boys, and girls equally can build resilience and cushion the shock when disasters strike or conflict breaks out. And on the other hand, humanitarian response, if it's done in a way that promotes gender equality and meets everyone's needs, including the sexual and reproductive health needs of women and adolescent girls, this can lay the foundation for rapid recovery and development. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, recently adopted by the United Nations, gives us hope because it's an agenda that puts forward precisely a vision of inclusive and holistic development that includes as specific goals and targets gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. And we especially have high hopes that young people, like the ones who have gathered here today, will help turn into reality this vision of development as a process of building more caring and more solidarity among people and among countries, for nature and for future generations who will need the shelter of our beautiful and fragile planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Now may I call upon the ambassador himself, Paul, please.
Good morning, everyone. First, can I say thank you to Yuriko and Roy for the opportunity to come and talk to you this morning. It's a great pleasure for me, for the Embassy, for the Australian Government to be involved in jointly launching this report today. I think Roy said that it wasn't their intention today to beat the drum of Unfpa, so I might do that for you and say a few words about their role, their very important role, because it's a unique role. Unfpa plays its role in tackling some of the most complex and sensitive issues that are at the same time central to achieving universal human development. It does that through expanding access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, women's empowerment, achieving gender equality, and, as we are seeing today, a focus on supporting women and girls affected by crisis. The report focuses our attention on the importance of these issues and the need to renew collective efforts to address them. By co-launching this report today, Australia affirms its very strong and long-standing commitment to supporting sexual and reproductive health and rights, and the goals set out in the 1994 International Convention on Population Development, the Beijing Platform for Action, and now the Sustainable Development Goals. As Yuriko has said, the launch of this report occurs at a time of many challenges throughout our world. Millions of people, more than at any time since World War II, are affected by various forms of crisis. An estimated 75% of those in need of humanitarian assistance are women and children. And the crises of the world are protracted and complex. And as we've heard, natural disasters are more frequent. And around 80% of the world's natural disasters occur in our region, Asia and the Pacific. I can well remember as a young diplomat many, many years ago, visiting Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon and Syria in the early 1980s, and thinking and hoping that this would be something that would be resolved and the people living in those camps, the women and girls especially living in those camps, would have the opportunity to lead rich and fulfilling lives. Unfortunately, that has not come to pass, and indeed we've seen the sorts of human suffering exposed there expanded many, many times around the world. Vulnerabilities relating to sexual and reproductive health, pressing issues even in peaceful times, become acute in humanitarian crises. Women and girls are disproportionately affected, too often resulting in preventable death or disability. The cost to individuals, communities, countries from these events is profound and long-lasting. Again, we've seen that borne out throughout the world. The international community is, though, developing a greater understanding of the need to strengthen responses to the sexual and reproductive health needs of people in humanitarian settings, and Unfpa has a critical role in advocating on these issues. Why Australia? Why am I here today? Australia is very proud of our advocacy and our practical support for providing sexual and reproductive health services in humanitarian settings. We fund Unfpa to respond to the sexual and reproductive health needs of affected populations, to reduce vulnerability and deliver life-saving services. That includes, for example, support in emergency responses in Myanmar, Iraq, Nepal and the Philippines. And a key new element of our partnership with Unfpa has been to fund the development and pre-position reproductive health kits in the region, which have already been used to save many lives. And more broadly, Unfpa is a key partner for the Australian Government in meeting our strategic and development objectives. Over the last 5 years, Australia has contributed over $70 million to Unfpa as voluntary core contributions to support its work. And a further $9.2 million will be provided early next year. In June, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia released its new Health for Development Strategy 2015 to 2020, which prioritises health system strengthening with a very strong focus on maternal, newborn and child health and family planning services in the Asia-Pacific region. As the report shows, the number of people facing crises and the dangers they face is stark. It highlights to all of us the urgent need to improve international efforts to encourage and support governments to provide sexual and reproductive health needs to all, especially in times of crisis. We commend Unfpa on producing this very important report and urge all of you here today to continue your work to reach the most vulnerable people affected by crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So every launch has, well, a launch. And so I would ask Yoriko and Paul to come and formally unveil or unribbon the swap itself. There is a pair of scissors there, and there's the launch, and we've got some cameras. Thank you for that. I know that Paul has to leave shortly, but I hope you can save at least part of the panel, which we're going to be starting next. So the central part of this day's event is our youth delegates, and I'd like to call them onto the stage and to take their seats. And they are in no particular order. Leena Shinwari, Wazma Hazratzai, both from... Both of them come from Afghanistan, and then we've got Kabita Balami from Nepal. And then the final two from the Philippines, Anzaira Rojas and Chloe Ronaldo. Please come on the stage. I'm going to give you guys a mic. Do we have one more microphone in the house? Anyone helping with the logistics? No? Just two? Okay, we'll just make do with two then. Thank you. So this is our youth panel, and I'm going to ask one of you to keep an eye on the time, or somebody in the audience to give me a cue on the time, because I don't have my watch with me. For the next hour or so, we'll be talking to them about their own personal stories, and there are some pretty amazing stories here in the mix. Before I start, I'd just like to summarize basically what we do generally, not just in humanitarian situations. Our UNFPA vision statement, if you will, is a world where every pregnancy is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. And when you have a humanitarian situation, whether it's a conflict or it's a natural catastrophe, earthquakes, cyclones, typhoons, landslides, all these needs and all these things come together, I think, even more. And so the work that we do actually cuts across everything that we'll be hearing today from these young folks here. And I would also like to share with you that our friends from Kabul have actually asked that if you take their photographs, you not share them widely on social platforms, because they do their work in confidence sometimes under very sensitive circumstances. Their own Facebook accounts, for example, are under false names because they've got to keep themselves concealed. So while we are filming this for our own purposes internally, please don't share their photographs with the outside world. I would also like to say that even though they all speak excellent English, it's not the first language for three of them. And so they were a bit nervous about being able to express themselves, but I have actually assured them that they are absolutely fine and that we're all friends over here and that there is nothing to be at all nervous about. So just to have fun and, you know, just to speak from the heart. So I'm going to be the master of ceremonies and the moderator, and I'm going to sort of sit over here so I can take a look at all of you. And I'd like to start with the first question, which really is for everyone in turn. How did you start the work that you are doing? Can you give us a very quick background about the work you're doing? I know, for instance, that Wasma and Lena are both with a very strong legal background and that they've been working with the government. But how did you actually start?
Good morning, everyone. I want to start my speech with Islamic greeting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Wajma Hazratzai, legal advisor, my profession, prosecutors. I want to start from my backgrounds. When I was a child, I didn't have the rights to study, to continue my lesson, to study, to go to school, university. It was the regime of Taliban. They were we live in so sensitive environments. They said that the girls or the female don't have rights of to study their lessons, educations, or working outside. We were just at home, and I wish that to be in future a prosecutor to work for females, women's rights. After 9/11, when the international community, and I would like thanks from US when they come, we faced to many positive changes. Also, we had some negative changes too. I study law, and after when I finished from university, I work in a Y unit. It was elimination violence against women. It was so sensitive area. For example, some of the cases it come hitting, beatings, and also divorce. And the male have. They always say that in my country that the female and the woman, they are the second-class creatures. It means you don't have the rights to work outside. You don't have the rights, freedom of speech. You don't have the rights to choose your spouse, or you don't have the rights to have to vote, or also to candidate yourself to be as a ministers. I faced too many challenges, and I struggle. I will more struggle and works for my country, for females, especially for females, and those dreams that I had it day by day come true, and I will continue. Thanks from your attention.
Lina.
By the name of Allah, salam to all. My name is Lina Shinwari. I'm from Afghanistan. I introduce shortly myself. I graduated from Islamic law and from Kabul University. My big wish was that I was the day came that I should be a defense lawyer, and today I am a defense lawyer. My first starting of work was the Ministry of Justice. I defense many cases. 7 is criminal cases, civil cases, and follow up different cases of women. And that was my big wishes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and namaste. It's me, Kavita Balami, and I'm from Nepal. As being a nurse is my childhood aim, and as I had finished my proficiency certificate level nursing in 2012, after that I had joined Monmon Memorial Community Hospital, which is in Kathmandu, Nepal, and I work there as a staff nurse, as a senior staff nurse, or as a midwifery, and I also work as a staff nurse in Boyuda Hospital. After the big earthquake in Nepal, we participated in reproductive health camp at Raswa district. Raswa district is one of the most earthquake affected district following devastating earthquake, which is supported by Unfpa and the people of Japan. And in that camp, I was assigned as a youth health educator, which is implemented by Monmon Memorial Community Hospital, my hospital, and the camp ran for 3 months. As that I joined this camp.
Thank you so much. I should say that this is the first time she's actually stepped outside her home country, and this is the first time she's taken a flight all the way outside. So thank you for being here with us today. And now to Anzaira.
Magandang umaga po. Good morning. Sir Roy, I started when I was 14 years old. I will not say when I was small, because I'm still small at this point. So I think, yeah, when I was in high school. So technically, Family Planning Organization of the Philippines was the first organization that I worked with or I volunteered with. They conducted the youth camp and invited different schools, and gratefully I represented my school in one of the province in Central Luzon. It's called Pampanga. So since then, in different levels of youth participation, I remember we started, arranging chairs whenever they have meetings or activities, and then eventually our roles changes, attending meetings, contributing to different projects and other stuff. So.
Thank you. And now we've got Chloe, who's only 15 and just starting out. Chloe.
Magandang umaga po. Good morning. I'm Chloe Reynaldo from the Philippines. I'm 15, and I actually only started my position as a peer educator last year. Like Ate Anzaira, I was 14 when I started, and I also attended a youth training, a youth health summit that was held by our provincial population and gender office. But actually, after that training, the participants who were there attended more seminars continuously, and then eventually we were already having seminars on raising awareness for AIDS, adolescent sexual reproductive health, and U4U Teen Trail. So basically, as peer educators, we were working with teens, spreading awareness about STIs, avoiding them, how to protect yourself, especially for the girls and the mothers who were attending the seminars.
So since you've got the mic, and I don't want to hand it here and then go all the way back, let's just start with Hugh.
Okay.
So, 15 years old, what are the challenges you face as a youth peer educator in regular times and also in humanitarian settings? And, I mean, how do people take you seriously?
At first, actually, they don't take me seriously right away because I'm short for my age. And I'm actually the Filipino gene. As a Filipino gene. Actually, since I'm 15 and I'm in 10th grade, I was actually accelerated. So those in the same grade as I am are actually older than me. And there are some who are in lower grades than me who are also older than me. And they tower over me. And that's only with the teenagers. But sometimes we have sessions with mothers, fathers, even elderly people. So a lot of times it's hard to get taken seriously because you have a small 15-year-old girl in front of you lecturing you about AIDS, STIs, sexual reproductive health and emergencies. It's hard to take me seriously because they ask, why am I talking about like that? Why am I there? But I think it's in our culture that we respect anyone who's talking, especially if the person who's talking knows what he or she is talking about. They can tell if that person really knows what he or she is saying. So if you just break the ice by commenting, yes, I'm young, and I know that I'm young to be saying this, but I know what I'm doing and what I can do can help you. So as I go on, as the seminar goes on, they listen, and then by the end, it's all good.
Thank you. So if she's only 15 now, you can just imagine what's going to happen when she gets a bit older. Anzara, you've been doing this for the last 14, 15 years. What have been your challenges? I know that the Philippines, even though it's very open in some ways, is also a pretty conservative society, and the work that you do can be deemed controversial. So how do you work around that?
Yeah, there are some criticisms and labels working with sexual and reproductive health. Actually, it's a sensitive area. I remember, actually, I graduated from a Catholic university. So when my professor knew that I started volunteering and working with a family planning organization of the Philippines, he called me up and he nagged about me, about the work that I'm doing. And he asked why I chose reproductive health field. Why not renal care, or why not diabetes care, because I'm a nurse by profession. Yeah, and of course, some of my classmates and colleagues also asked the same. I'm also actually active in our church, and of course, every Sunday, the priest will say something about negative things about reproductive health law, or the things that the advocates that are doing. So it's not really easy, Sir Roy, but I think what's important here that you know what you are doing, especially we are in a medical field, and we know working with reproductive health, we really saves the lives of women, girls, and boys in times of normal and emergency situation. The second challenge would be is, how do we continue working with young people? I just turned 30 last December 1. So technically, according to UN definition of young people, I'm not a young person anymore. But gladly, in our country, National Youth Commission, you're still young when you are 15 to 30 years old. So you're married. So I'm still young technically in the Philippines, but globally, I'm not a young person anymore. So what I'm talking about is FPOP and UNFPA entrusted us when we are 24 years old and below. And the main challenge is, how do we continue that passion, commitment, and how do we pass the torch to the next cohort or generation? How do we maximize the investment of those organizations on the things that we are doing right now?
Thank you so much. Kavita ji, when I spoke to you yesterday after your flight over here and you were a bit tired, you shared with me some very interesting stories about your challenges, especially after the earthquake. And when you went to the RH camp in Rasua, which is one of the worst hit areas after the earthquake. Can you describe for me what you told me yesterday, which was a very personal story, and how you sort of overcame all those challenges?
First of all, being a staff nurse is a risky job. It's also thrilling. But after the earthquake hit in Nepal, we went for a camp in Rasua. Rasua is the most affected district after earthquake. And following earthquake, Nepal, as you know, Nepal have many remote areas, and Rasua is one of the district which we have got many challenges, just like transportation challenges and the shelter challenges. When we have to reach in our camp, we have to walk for 7 to 8 hours to reach the camp by road, and we also have to carry our luggage to work. And after the earthquake, monsoon season starts. And one of my personal experience, monsoon season starts, and there was a landslide. And while reaching camp, I was stuck in the landslide, and people pulled me out from the landslide, and it was most of the thrilling stories of my person, thrilling, adventurous, and I got stuck in the landslide. It was thrilling and also adventurous. A trip to camp. That's it.
I think it's the first time I've heard somebody say that being almost killed was thrilling. But,
it's thrilling.
But in terms of the actual work itself, when you were in the camp, what were the challenges working with the pregnant women and the young women over there?
It was this, as Nepali is our national language, but in remote areas, people didn't know the Nepali language, and we have got a language problem there. We didn't understand what they were saying, and because of that, we can't provide full service to them, what they were saying. But we got some translator there, and after that, we solved our problem.
And you were there for about 3 months.
The camp ran for 3 months.
And what is the situation now over there?
And it's all fine. Many NGOs were providing temporary shelter for the people who were affected by earthquake, and also providing a dignity kit and clean hygienic kit for the people, especially for lactating mother, pregnant mother, and the adolescent.
Okay. Moving to you, Lena and Wasma, can you talk about your challenges? I know that you are in a very tough situation, and you are working with many different stakeholders, but very challenging ones. Can you share some of your challenges and how you've been able to try to overcome them?
Thank you. The first challenge that Afghanistan people face with them, men, woman, child, girl, boy, that's insecurity in this country. That's the big challenge. The second challenge is treatment by those that they were in Afghanistan. We had the meeting with the Taliban and participating in Bagwash conference also. When we negotiated with Taliban, we said that we are those women, we are those girls that you close the door of education in front of us. But today we struggle, we defense from your cases in different trail of Afghanistan. Today, you treat as you insecure our country. That's the big challenge of Afghanistan people. This too, insecurity and treatment, I think that's big challenge in Afghanistan. And all challenges include of this too.
So let me ask you, Wasma, taking off from that, when you meet the Taliban, when you meet fighters and you try to convince them to allow services for women and girls and young people, how do you succeed in convincing them?
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Before negotiation or meeting with Taliban delegation, I thought maybe they are so dangerous people. Maybe even they don't meet us face to face or didn't negotiation with us face to face because we are female. When we go to Qatar and we negotiate face to face, I discuss with them and I defend from rights of women and female. I said that you are those people that you defame Islam. You are those people that trample our rights. You know, we have lots of rights in Islam. For example, we have the right to living in peace environment. We have the right to study. In the first verse of Holy Quran mentioned that men and women, female and male, they have the right to continue their educations. But I said, you are those people that trample this right. They said, yes, we did this. After this, we will come to reintegrations. We will come to talk with the governments, but they said the one governments not independence. It depends to foreigner countries. When we have we want something, for example, they said our loss of name in blacklist. We cannot travel, trade to our own countries. Whenever we come to Afghanistan, use troops or United States, they will put us in the jail. They said we have this right to again come back to the country, return to the country, and we will accept all of your rights, and we will come to peace and reintegrations. I think so. But they won't promise in their all step or in their all promises that they said. We said we have lots of outcomes in new regime. We have lots of outcomes. For example, we passed the family law. We have the laws of elimination violence against women. This is the law. It has 44 article, 12 section. It's a good law. It's a big achievement for female. And we said, when you people come, you will again trample our rights. You must talk with the governments directly. You must promise that after that you respect all of us, you respect female, you respect male, you respect humanitarian. After that we will accept you like brothers or like our countrymen. And the challenges, as Lina said, that insecurity, when from morning we leave home, we don't have any hope to return to home safely. Because in every minute, every second, extortion attacks. Taliban threaten us. When we go to jobs, we said we must struggle. We must victimize ourselves. If we don't victimize ourselves, how do we defend from the other females? Those females that they live in the suburbs, those females that they hope that they said that we have some representative from them. And we struggle, I will struggle, I will victimize myself for our own rights. Thank you, Masara.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so actually just in keeping with this theme, if I can stay with you for a second longer, both of you, you said that there have been some successes because you've had certain laws passed, at least on paper, you've got some protection. But how is it being implemented? Do you see any hope? Either of you?
Okay, I'm also prosecutor of EVALA, Elimination Violence Against Women. I have many cases. I also follow up the cases. There is the cases, for example, the man or the husband's beating his wife. I follow up that case. There is some article when they hitting, when they beating the wives, we put them in the jails about 3 or 4 months. After that, if the wife want to continue their life with their husbands, again we bring peace among them, and we complete the case of them. Many cases, for example, some of the men in our country, they have more than 1 wife, 2 wives, 3 wives, 4 wives. It is good that it mentioned in Islam that every man has the right to have 4 wives, but it has some regulations and it has some rules. But in our country, they don't implement that rule regulations. Just they married with 4, more than 2 wives. They use them just like not human. They use and they spend their time, not feed them, not economic empowerments. And also such a many different types of cases we face, and the government support us. Government said that the parliament passed this law, and we will implement this law. Yes.
Right. Okay. Do you have anything to add, Lena?
Just I wanted 2 cases.
Please.
As Wajman said, that we follow up different case of violence. One case that I follow up, I want to tell that a woman that they complained from his husband. She called us and want to help with them. She said that my daughter, that her age is 30 years old. My husband want to marry them to a man and sell her daughter, and want to marry it for himself. That's very bad cases that I face it, and I advise her to court and to court and to contact and help and guide for different trail section. That was very bad cases that I follow up. Very harmful.
Thank you. Can I go back to Chloe? And I just want you to react a little bit to what you're hearing, because it's a very different situation from the Philippines in some ways. But do you see anything in common? Do you see anything like the attitude towards women or anything like that that you've sort of encountered in your work with your own peers? What are the attitudes, and, you know, what are your own personal observations so far?
Well, from what I see, our situation is in some ways not very alike, and then there are some elements that are the same. For example, I go to a public school, and actually more than 60% are females. So we have that. We're valued. A lot of our teachers are also female, and female presences in the workplace are generally welcomed and even praised, because in our country, it doesn't matter what your sex or gender is. What matters is you're a good worker, you're good at what you do. So if you're in a workplace like that, they're very accepting of whatever it is. But since our country, the Philippines, is divided into 3 major parts: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Luzon and Visayas are predominantly Christian, Catholic, Roman Catholic, and it's rather peaceful there. However, in Mindanao, the southern part, it's predominantly Muslim, and that's actually where most of the conflicts are. There are civil wars going down under there, and actually we haven't really touched a lot on that part, but I think polygamy is also allowed there as well. But from what I know, the way they treat women there is not as bad or as repressive as they have mentioned in Afghanistan.
Sticking with you and you as well, I know that you've been a fighter on the front lines, Anzaira, of the reproductive health law, and this is something that you also speak about. Isn't that, in a way, violence against women? I mean, do you see it that way, or do others see it that way? And in a humanitarian situation, I know you shared with me that sometimes you can use a humanitarian situation to actually get at that challenge in a very roundabout way. Could you sort of expand on that?
Maybe, sir, when we talk about gender-based violence, we can see different aspects. So when we talk about humanitarian response, in my experience way back, Typhoon Washi or Sendong in 2011, there's violence because there's no available services among pregnant and lactating mothers. So violence means it's not just physical, it's not just sexual, but also there's a component of violence when we don't provide the certain rights that women and girls must access in terms with humanitarian response. The Unfpa Philippines, together with Department of Health and other civil society organizations in the country, really starting to create a space or services for Safe Motherhood Program, reaching pregnant and lactating mothers in evacuation camps since 2011. But before, there's no available services. When there is typhoon, when there is disaster. I live in Central Luzon. It's called Pampanga. And since I was young, our home is always submerged with water every year. So I haven't seen any services at all since I was young. So I think that's one part of, violence is existing. And when we talk about young girls in evacuation camps, Typhoon Washi, Typhoon Bofa in 2012, Typhoon Haiyan, the super typhoon in 2013. There are a lot of stories of young girls experiencing abuse or rape in the camps, inside the camps. And there's increasing transsexual sex or human trafficking when typhoon or disasters comes in certain areas. So that's why it's very important. Yesterday we attended the GBV event. So it's very important that GBV component or programming is present.
GBV means
gender-based violence is one part of a pie when we look at the programming on humanitarian response.
Thank you. Kavita ji, I know that in Nepal, like in my home country, India, women are sometimes treated not very well. And I wonder whether in your experience in Rasua reproductive health camp, you heard certain stories from women about how they had suffered or what their challenges were with their families or their husbands, and how that was making their situation even more difficult. Did you hear of any such instances, or what is your own personal experience from being from that part of the world?
Being a part of a health camp, I didn't got any of the gender-based violence stories, but I got some other interesting stories as being midwifery. In our camp in Rosua, I think in Golzung, the place of Rosua district, a girl named Srijana Bika, who is 16 years old, pregnant. 16 years old, a very old and disadvantaged adolescent girl who attended RS camp, reproductive health camp in Rosua, in our camp. And in second day of camp, he he developed a labor pain, and we conduct a delivery in our camp in a tent. So we conduct a normal delivery, and the baby and mother was both fine, but she was only 16 years, and it's so sad to hear.
So how do you, as a midwife or a nurse, try to change people's attitudes or try to bring about a different kind of thinking? Because as a nurse, people talk to you all the time. Do you ever try to talk to the family or try to, bring about a change in the society around you? Because I know that the legal age to get married is much higher. So how do you actually talk about these issues?
I'm also a health educator, and I also attend some classes in my city, in some of the school. And in school, I also aware the adolescent girl and also adolescent boys about the early child marriage, risks of early child marriage, and also about the reproductive health. And also, I educate the family members about the early child marriage, what are the consequences of early child marriage, and the gender-based violence.
So when you counsel them, do you help change their mind? Do people actually change their attitude and their thinking?
I think after the class, they questions so many about the true stories, which helps to change them, and also tell them about my family, and I tell them it will be easy, it will be to change yourself, and they tried to change themselves.
Great. I'm now going to break away from the panel and call upon a very special guest. Mia Urbano is here from the Australian Government DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade's Health Wing, and she is a gender advisor for the Asia-Pacific region, and she would like to come and share her thoughts about the work that they do and also her observations about what the panel's been saying. And then after she's done, I'll go back to the panel for a final conclusion roundup. Please, Mia, thank you. I know I didn't get your formal title right. It's a long title, so if you want to just reiterate it, and you have the bio in your folder as well, of course.
You're quite right, Roy. Thank you for the invitation to be a bookend to this panel. I feel incredibly humbled to actually be talking at all this morning, given the power of these women human rights defenders. I think we could rename the session. To locate myself, I'm the Regional Social Development Specialist for the Australian Aid Program in Southeast Asia. When I started the job, I had a very broad brief, but I think reflecting Australia's increasing attention on gender equality and women's empowerment issues, that's become the primary focus of my role. To start with some remarks, reflections on what you have raised for us this morning. I think alongside being intensely moving and inspiring in terms of your courage and drive, just to highlight that you're very motivated and speaking about the support that you lend as professionals to more vulnerable women in your communities, but at significant personal cost to yourselves and personal risk to yourselves, whether that's political or just an unstable disaster setting. I think that you also highlight, because there is a need for really concerted advocacy for prioritisation of sexual and reproductive health services in emergency settings, for an adequate response to gender-based violence, that we focus very much on the rhetoric around services for those in need. And I think our panel this morning brings to mind that this is also illuminating the agency of young women women and girls in their capacity to respond and to be part of the adequacy and comprehensiveness of what we provide in humanitarian settings. I think this launch itself is a really nice closure to a fortnight of collaboration between the Australian Government and Unfpa. We, this week, as part of the 16 Days of Activism, co-hosted a forum, Asia Pacific's first forum on the primary prevention of violence against women and girls through transforming social norms, harmful gender norms, in collaboration with UN Women and the Korean Women's Development Institute. Alongside that, your colleague Priya Mawa, where is Priya in the room? You're here. Your humanitarian coordinator has just returned from a week of training with our colleagues in Canberra, the first of its kind, looking at sexual and reproductive health and rights in emergency settings. And Priya was sharing with me earlier that for DFAT, and it was a range of crisis response team staff, humanitarian section staff, that for them they very much came to the table from the mould that water, food and shelter were the urgent things in an emergency. They were the things that warranted prioritisation. Whereas by the end of the training and the discussions and the case stories and the personal stories that Priya shared with them, that people realised that responding to pregnancy complications was a matter of life and death, that having adequate services immediately for survivors of sexual assault, of rape, was warranting to be in the top line, the first order of things that you provide. And as Aira, you rightly say that it's a form of violence not to provide those services. So there's an added impetus to why this should matter and be accorded its emphasis. I think I might close my remarks by saying yesterday there was a discussion. As everybody knows, it's been quite an intensive fortnight of workshops in Bangkok. But the theme for a meeting yesterday was about breaking the silos. And I take that message on board because I think within the Australian Government program, we have a gender section that has prioritised responding to violence against women and girls as one of 3 pillars of its work. In the humanitarian section, we have preventing and responding to gender-based violence as a strategy, a key strategy. I have to confess, we don't often bring those together. I've learnt a lot through being invited to participate in this event about the work that we're doing in tandem with Unfpa, directly responding to our gender equality priority for addressing violence against women and girls. So I have heard we were at Forthright Advocate at the Sendai Declaration negotiations to make sure that the language of sexual reproductive health, and we'd love it to be sexual and reproductive health and rights, and we know we're often wrestled, so it's sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. But I'm glad we were able to play a part with conversations and support from Unfpa to get the language into the declaration. And I certainly will be making sure we do concerted advocacy so that the Australian Government joins up the work that it's doing across its humanitarian and its development setting work. So, but most of all, thank you very much to you as professionals for the courageous work that you're doing that we are able to access today.
Thank you for that. Mia, why don't you just come and join us here? And I don't know if you have any questions you would like to ask our panelists in particular because of your experience.
I think for me, one of the my major responses to you is where do you get your courage and your perseverance from? What sustains the work that you do in the face of a lot of resistance?
Why don't you start? So the question is, where do you get your strength from? How are you so strong? You still keep fighting, and what is it inside you that keeps you going?
my how do I feel strengthened or sorry, I didn't get some question.
How are
Yeah.
you so strong? What makes you strong?
Okay. Sorry, English is not my native language. I have some. um, First of all, my family encouraged me to have power to work outside of home, and also after that the governments, my friends, Lena, she's my best friends, she always encouraged me, convinced me to work together, to struggles, to have our position or personality as a human, as a female in society and in our country, and finish just.
Lena, what makes you so strong?
Thank you. My goal was in my life was that serve for my people honestly. That make me strong that we should struggle in this way because we live in that society that they didn't have a security peace. Not pave the ground for the woman that they work in front of outside of their home. But my family support, my friends support us that we are strong and feel strong. Thank you.
Kavita ji, what made you decide to become a nurse and midwife? What keeps you with that spirit?
First, all credit goes to my family. They helped me. They were standing with me in every obstacle, in every happiness or in every sorrowness. So first, credit goes to my family, and next, it was my childhood aim. Don't know where from it comes. I think it comes from inner heart to be a nurse. So, all credit goes to family.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are a lot. Yeah, of course, my mother, who since then working abroad to sustain us. We are 5. I'm the eldest, so sorry. When we talk about our mothers, we get emotional. Yeah, and I have a lot of mentors. So, Kuya Mario, Ate Emmy, so they entrusted us. That's why I learned from them to pass opportunities and pay it forward. So that's why I keep on emphasizing that you need to pass the torch and responsibilities and opportunities to others. Actually, I would like to acknowledge Ajong. Ajong, please stand up. Ajong is a survivor of Typhoon Washi in Cagayan de Oro 2011 and one of the great peer educators in the humanitarian response. So, like Ajong, they are our inspiration. Why we keep on moving forward and volunteering and still believing that, there's hope. Despite all of the typhoons and disasters that coming our way. And there's hope in trusting the capacities of young people. Yeah.
Last but not least, Chloe.
So first of all, the main source of my strength would always be my parents. Very supportive. They're here actually, my mother and my father. Stand up, mommy. And there's my dad. He's already taking pictures. very supportive. They came to me with Bangkok. They were very happy when I received this invitation. And another thing that keeps me going, as always, the presence of people like Ate Zai, mentors who believe in the power of the youth. They are the reason why I'm able to do what I do. I'm trained to be a peer educator because they believe in the capacity of the youth. They train us. They give us everything that we need so that we can take the torch and continue the cycle so that more youth are trained, we can do more and like that. And actually another main source of my strength are the stories that I hear as a peer educator, especially what happened in some. So I would just like to share the story of a girl that I met this year. Haiyan is the most well-known storm so far to hit our country, but our province, Aklan, wasn't as hard hit as Tacloban, which all of you know. And the storm that actually hit our country, that hit our province first, was Typhoon Frank, which was in 2008. So I talked to a girl. We were having a session with the school. She was actually not a student at that school. She'd seen what was happening. She came up to participate because she heard that we were talking about experiences in the storm. So she was around my age, 15. But during Frank, she was also 8 years old, as I was. Her father had died at a young age when she was very young, so she only lived with her mother. During the storm, their house was too far from the evacuation center, so they couldn't go there for shelter. They weathered out the storm inside their house, and at the end of it, since there was a lot of flooding, her mother, who had tried to protect her to the best of her abilities, was very sick, very sick. And they didn't have enough food, and help took a long time coming at the time. So when the relief goods were finally delivered, they were delivered at the evacuation center. So the girl, her name is Carla, she told me that at the young age of 8, can you imagine, very small girl, she walked around 2 miles to go to the evacuation center so that she could get food for her mother. And then when she got at the evacuation center, she was not given priority because she was a small girl, no parents to speak of with her, and she was like ignored in favor of the other people who were well enough to get the relief goods. So when she finally got her relief goods, she walked again the 2 miles, but when she got to her home, her mother was already dead. So the fact that that girl was comfortable enough with me to share that story keeps me going because it's for them that I'm doing this, that I want to give them the information, I want to be able to help them, that the youth don't always have to be marginalized, we don't have to be the blighted section, we can do what we want, we can help through our own power because we're not just kids, we're kids, but we can do a lot with our own power, that's why.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, that would be a perfect place to end, except I have a little story that Chloe told me that day over tom yum soup with her parents around her, which is that she sometimes shocks them. How do you shock your parents, Chloe?
Because I'm a peer educator, and actually recently before I came here to the Philippines, I had a string of Red Campus tours where we went around 30 schools in our province raising awareness about AIDS. And actually, my parents are a bit shocked every time I mention the terminologies that are involved. For example, sexual intercourse, penetrative sex, condoms, and they're a bit surprised because I use those terms very casually. I forgot that I hadn't told them about that yet. So when I mentioned the topics that we were talking about, it was very casual, and then they were very shocked. But one of their main concerns is if maybe anyone would heckle me because I'm 15, I'm a small girl, and then the people that I'm talking to are boys, teenagers, and you know, if I mention those things, maybe I get heckled or something, but they're not, they're fine.
I don't think I would want to be the person to heckle you somehow. So on that note, I'm going to throw it open to the floor. Any questions, please? Put your hands up. Anything you'd like to comment on? Anything you'd like to say about the panel? You know, yes, Mark Desmond Hughes from the Bangkok Post.
I'm very interested in the fact that there seems to be a big Australian influence of this, but Australia has a terrible international reputation in terms of dealing with refugees, and how does the panel think about that?
Well, yes, we have journalists in the room.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out, Roy. Do I start with the caveats that I'm the social development advisor fighting for good, the best that our aid program can be in Southeast Asia? So I'm not well placed to talk about our asylum seeker policies domestically. The representatives in the room are here trying to do as much as we can to make sure our aid program in Southeast Asia, with many countries exiting because countries are reaching lower middle income status, that we advocate very strongly that we stay and have a presence to make sure it's inclusive growth in this region. So I'm afraid I can't comment on our domestic asylum seeker policy imperatives.
But I think I would add that from our perspective, we push all countries to do the right thing. It's not easy, as you know. Different governments have different policies, and then governments change and policies change. But I think we collectively, both the work that is being done by them and by us, collectively addresses and hopefully strengthens the fabric. There are challenges, one can't deny that. It's as true in the West as it is in the other parts of the world. And I think we would be naive if we said that we support each and every policy of each and every government in terms of what our mandate is. But we are here to work with governments and civil society simultaneously. And these are important conversations and challenges to be addressed, and we have to keep at it. Ultimately, we've got international protocols, we've got the SDGs now, we had the MDGs earlier. All governments are supposed to strive to adhere. And I think it's just part of the reality of the world that we're in, that these conversations are getting more challenging in some ways. We're seeing what's happening right now with the Middle East refugee crisis. We've seen what's happened recently after the Paris attacks, where certain states in America have said that they don't want any Syrian refugees. So these things happen all the time, and we just have to address them in the best way that we can, keeping our shared humanity at the core. And I know this sounds sometimes like a little bit of rhetoric, but we do actually try and give it teeth all the time, and we try and show by example how we can work together in a more humane, compassionate, and strategic way. Because we know that, not investing in this work, as you just said, is not the answer. And we've seen that when you actually open hearts and minds, things do happen. So we just have to keep at it. It's just the reality of the UN, of government, and of people like these here today. So I think it's just something we all have to work on together. Thank you.
A follow-up. Sadly, my feeling is that the rest of the world has reacted negatively to the immigration crisis from problem places, and it's increased racism. And so not only is humanity being addressed, but also racism has to be addressed. And how do you as an organisation deal with that?
No, I think that's an important point. And from a United Nations agency like us and the UN system in general, I think we just have to insist on countries doing the right thing. And rejecting people who are fleeing conflict and violations of human rights is not the right thing. And there are international legal instruments that protect the rights of these people, and we have to insist that all countries adhere to those principles. Now, the United Nations cannot impose things on countries. The only thing we can do is to insist, to recommend, to suggest, to insist yet again. And, you know, we are not a global government with an army to impose actions on other countries, and that's not the way things should be done anyway. But I think that is the only thing we can do, and also to present evidence to substantiate those recommendations and those principles that are already in international legal instruments, and to insist that policies be based on that evidence, that the great majority of these people are ordinary people like all of us, fleeing unbearable situations, and that policies should be based on attending to the needs of that great majority of people, and not the minority that resort to terrorism and acts of hatred.
Any other comments? Yes. One of our UN colleagues here. Please identify yourself and which agency you're with.
Hi, my name is Prashanti. I'm from the UNEP and the UNDP Joint Program on Poverty and Environment. I just wanted to thank each one of you amazing, inspirational ladies for being here today. You guys really made my week. So, you know, tip of the hat to each one of you. I salute what you guys do. What I found something common in a few of your experiences is dealing with religious institutions, dealing with clerics, dealing with religious leaders, religious teachings. I want to know from you, what opportunities do you think is there for those of us in the UN and in civil society to support you having these conversations with religious leaders?
So who would like to start? I think it's something that each of you can actually talk about, especially Afghanistan and the Philippines. Yes, please. Go ahead. You've got a microphone? There. Wasma?
In Afghanistan, some sensitive religious elders nowadays some changes in their minds. Those in USID, UNDP, Unfpa, they have some programs in public awareness, in social media and training. Before they were not present or ready to participate in the training conference with females. They said, we know everything. It is not... it means you people don't know about laws. We know laws. We know everything. Nowadays, they are ready to join or participate in conferences. I have participated in many conferences that was about elimination violence against women. First of all, when they participate, they were so sensitive. They don't talk. They don't participate. No speech. After that, when we talk about laws, when we say that why you people do such a things, we are also human, don't call us the second-class creatures, females, women, and girls, they are human, we must work for them. They said that, no, you live in sensitive country, you must not defend from female, you must not defend from your rights. If you defend generally or in training centers, you may threaten from the Taliban or from some people. I said, never mind. I will participate in many more conferences abroad or inside my country, and learn something new and work for these people, religious, those elders, that they are sensitive peoples. They don't know about laws. Just they shows themselves like religious elders, and they trample the rights of us. Thank you.
So thank you so much for that question. So in the Philippines, actually, we have interfaith group who are supportive on reproductive health. When we talk about, so two things. When we talk about humanitarian response, I remember, churches, Catholic churches, they open their church or churches for refugees as an evacuation center. So when we go there for reproductive health mission in their churches, we just compromise. So actually, they are okay providing services among pregnant and lactating mothers. But then again, they have stance on contraceptives, for example. So maybe at some point, in all cases or scenarios, we just need to compromise things. But at the end of the day, they would also like to provide services among, to provide safe motherhood program or services. And we talk about young people, they have also some sensitivities when we talk about, they are okay when we talk about gender-based violence to end, to eliminate. But when we talk about, they don't want to have increasing cases of teenage pregnancy and HIV. But of course, their stand on contraceptions, on condoms. So, communication and space for to lay down what we can offer in the community or evacuation center is very important. So that's in humanitarian response. So I also remember there's a photo. One of the archdiocese or archbishop in Cagayan de Oro, he's handling dignity kit or the hygiene kit to pregnant mothers. So when we talk about normal setting, we have the reproductive health law, and one of the provisions is comprehensive sexuality education. So just like what Chloe have said a while back, the southern part of the Philippines, where we have a lot of Muslims, brothers and sisters, Department of Education and different civil society organizations join together, work to get funded by, supported by UNFPA, to talk to the elders in southern part of the Philippines to integrate comprehensive sexuality education in the curriculum. So right now, it's ongoing. It's in the process, especially that we change our curriculum to K+12, the Department of Education. So not just on Muslim brothers and sisters, but also to indigenous people. So I think when we see it, it's in a preparedness side when we talk about humanitarian response. So we are there. I cannot say that it's perfect right now, but I think there's a lot of opportunities. The stars are aligned right now. So of course, we don't want to experience humanitarian again or typhoon again, but when we talk about typhoon and humanitarian response, I think all of the people or organizations are willing to support.
We'll take one more question and then we've got to show a short film to you, so I don't want to take too much time. I know we have to be out of here by 12 for food and drink afterwards, so one more question? Anyone? A comment or anything? Yes.
Good morning. I'm Mark from the Asian Forum of Parliamentarians on Population and Development. I would just like to add whether you have worked with parliamentarians, members from the Congress, Senate, in your advocacy, in your mission.
Yes, I'm a prosecutor, work in governments, follow up the cases, and just about 2 months I joined to Presidential Palace as an expert. I have joined job there, and the law of that elimination violence against women, I was the representative from my organizations in parliaments. There was some of negative ideas. They said that this law shouldn't be published or shouldn't be implemented in the countries. It has some 2 or 3 part of that law has problems. All of that law is good law. It has 44 articles and 12 sections. I defend from that law in the parliaments, from my organizations, and I have discussions, also suggest lots of resolutions for that law, and it will be passed, inshallah, in next year, and since now we implement that law.
Would anyone else like to answer whether you work with parliamentarians, legislators, politicians?
I think in the Philippines, especially when we talk about reproductive health law, it's one of the strategies, actually. Young people working closely with the young legislators, especially in the Congress. And I think if your organization, sir, you have a counterpart in the Philippines. It's called PLCPD. So YPEER, Youth Pre-Education Network, that what we are representing right now, is part of the Youth Consortium for Reproductive Health, also supported by UNFPA way back 2011. And we really, we talk to the young legislators, we arrange or organize forums to ensure that in the law, there's a lens of young people, adolescents and young people. So I think that's really a strategy, especially so that they will not forget. I mean, legislators, they will not forget that it is very important, critical, crucial important, that in all aspects of the laws, especially reproductive health law, and humanitarian is one provision in that law, and young people must be part of that.
So with that, I think we've come to the end of the panel, and now we will show you a short film. We'll all get off the stage. A big round of applause to our panelists. And thank you as well, Mia. And so now we are going to go off the stage and go into the audience. And this is a film that was done by our Philippine country office. It's about the aftermath of Super Typhoon Haiyan. It was made earlier this year. And this brings all the work that we do together in the humanitarian frame and also outside it. Please.
Candles lighted. Sky lanterns released.
The Lord is kind and merciful.
Prayers offered. A year after the strongest typhoon ever recorded in history slammed the Philippines, the people remembered their dead and celebrated the living. On November 8, 2013, the typhoon, locally known as Yolanda, wreaked havoc in eastern, central, and western Visayas. Hardest hit were the provinces of Eastern Samar, Capiz, Iloilo, and Leyte, affecting more than 14 million people. Over 6,000 people died, and 4 million were left homeless. Haiyan's giant storm surges and powerful winds demolished virtually everything along its path, including hospitals, clinics, and health centers. UNFPA, or the United Nations Population Fund, took the lead in safeguarding the reproductive health and protection needs of women and girls affected by Haiyan.
The minute after the destruction has happened, there are already women giving birth, but they have no place to give birth. So they might have to give birth in the side of the road or anywhere else.
One of these women was Emily Sagalis. 3 days after Haiyan, she gave birth in the ruins of the Tacloban airport, amid the debris left by the typhoon. Of the population affected by Haiyan, 3.5 million were women of childbearing age. Around 270,000 were pregnant, and 180,000 women had just given birth in the 6 months prior to the typhoon. To ensure access to facilities for safe and clean deliveries, UNFPA set up emergency maternity units. The EMUs were modular hospitals built from containers and can accommodate normal and cesarean section deliveries.
Malinis, kumpleto sila sa mga facilities. Para talagang private room, nandun na lahat, kahit anong surgery, nandun na lahat. Hindi ko alam na mayroon pala na natutulong sa amin.
Vivian Aplaca was the first mother who delivered by C-section at the EMU in Palo, Leyte.
Sabi na, doon ka na lang manganak sa San Jose, mga parang tent na yun. Gusto ko, sabi ko, normal na lang sana dito na sa bahay. Kasi wala talagang hospital na nag-operate.
The second EMU was installed in Balangiga, Eastern Samar, where the town's main hospital, the Albino M. Duran Memorial Hospital, was totally destroyed. The Department of Health said Haiyan destroyed more than 400 health facilities in the region. One of them was the Palo Maternity House. It is one of the 19 birthing centers reconstructed and rehabilitated through the support of UNFPA and the government of Japan.
Kung titingnan natin yung situation namin ngayon, mas maganda ngayon as compared before. Dati, weighing scale, yung height scale, naghihiraman. Ngayon hindi na kasi lahat ng barangay may kanya-kanya. Yung BP apparatus, dati hihiram ka. Ngayon lahat ng midwives, lahat ng BHWs may kit sila.
During the acute phase of the crisis, UNFPA equipped local health facilities with reproductive health kits, ranging from medical equipment and supplies to medicines. Reproductive health medical missions were conducted to provide pre- and postnatal care services to pregnant and lactating women and their babies. Women who went to the medical missions received dignity kits for personal hygiene.
May towel, may mga malong, may sabon, may toothpaste, yung basic hygiene, may orinola nga doon. Nakatulong yun, lalo na sa mga babae, may mga sanitary pads doon, kulang sa tubig. So wala kang mapupuntahan, hindi ka makakabili.
Mothers who are in their last trimester of pregnancy received clean delivery kits, which a birth attendant can use when assisting a delivery outside of a health facility. Each kit contains soap, plastic sheet, razor, and string for tying the umbilical cord. In the course of the Haiyan response, UNFPA and its partners conducted more than 200 reproductive health medical missions. During the missions, women were educated on reproductive health through information sessions that tackled topics such as signs and symptoms of pregnancy complications, family planning, sexually transmitted infections, and adolescent reproductive health. UNFPA established meaningful engagement with the youth affected by Haiyan. As volunteers for the humanitarian response, the young people were trained to facilitate health information sessions and to conduct peer education sessions. Around 20,000 young people were able to participate in various activities held at the youth-friendly spaces. Disasters often trigger a breakdown in social structures, in safety nets, and in law and order. These are situations that give rise to cases of abuse, rape, even trafficking in women and children. Social Welfare Assistant Secretary Vilma Cabrera says women and children are often the most vulnerable in disaster situations. In the case of Haiyan, women account for more than 50% of the displaced. Various forms of sexual violence are not unheard of in evacuation centers.
That's the most common. When women go to the toilet, we have cases of men acting as like drunk, and they pretend to be drunk so that they can go to the CR of women. And even inside evacuation centers, some husbands do inflict physical violence on their wives and some of their children.
Human trafficking also posed a threat to women and children. 5 months after Haiyan, a female police officer from Tacloban City played a key role in rescuing 5 children from suspected traffickers. She was trained by UNFPA on violence against women and children, or VAUC.
Mga minority sila, mga 12, 10, 14, 15. Yung iba stop na ng pag-aaral. In-interview namin yung mga bata. Bakit kayo sumama sa kanila? Sabi ng mga bata kasi nag-promise daw na papaaralin sila doon. After ng pagpaaral sa kanila, bibigyan sila ng magandang trabaho. Titrip din sila sa ibang bansa.
In partnership with the Department of Social Welfare and Development, women-friendly spaces were set up to provide women immediate access to services, such as psychosocial support, medical missions, and information sessions. Through the WFS, VOWC survivors are immediately referred to agencies that can provide medical care and police protection.
Isa siyang lugar para sa mga kababaihang kung saan mapipil nila na they are safe, kung may mga problema sa kanilang bahay related to violence, may mapupuntahan sila na pwede nilang bigyan ng information kung saan sila pupunta para matulungan sila sa kanilang problema.
Jade Paredes is among hundreds of women who have been empowered in the WFS. She was also trained to protect other women and children. Only Jade never knew it would hit too close to home. As a women's GBV Watch Group volunteer, seeing her daughter suffer outraged her.
10 days na kapapanganak niya lang, nag-text siya akin hating gabi, hambal sa akin. Mauwi ako dyan, sinaktan ako.
When Jade was able to bring her daughter Johanna to the WFS, her volunteer colleagues spoke to her to explain her rights. For Jade's daughter, learning from a cluster of women who are fully aware of their rights empowered her. She was able to muster the strength to begin rebuilding her and her son's life. At the WFS, women were also equipped with livelihood skills.
Minsan po, nang gumagawa kami, kita nyo naman yung mga shell craft, iniipon yun namin at saka ginagawa, binibinta yun.
To ensure that services to protect women and children continue after Haiyan, Unfpa supported the rehabilitation of damaged women's crisis centers.
Itong shelter in connection with the people at the barangay or at the evacuation center, nagawang temporary home sa kanila, lalo na yung mga babae na may problema dun sa evacuation center.
The healing and rebuilding in areas ravaged by Haiyan continue to this day. Much still needs to be done, but hope is in the air.
The principle that we all espoused in the rehabilitation effort was build back better. Nandun na kami sa stage na build back better na most of the facilities are really better than it was before.
Through the support of partners, efforts to restore reproductive health and protection services for women and children in this region have started to bear fruit. Beck says the close coordination between international agencies and local partners was necessary to capacitate those on the ground and ensure sustainability of the efforts.
We are not only responding to the immediate disaster and doing life-saving interventions, we are also trying to see how can we leave the localities better off once the response is over than hopefully than it was before.
Haiyan has become an opportunity for the triumph of the human spirit.
Sobrang malaking utang na loob ko dyan sa nagpaanak sa akin. Sa laki naman si Sarian, kasi ibinta ko pa yung lahat ng baboy ko, hindi ako kakanin. Pasalamat kami mag-asawa. Malaking tulong nun sa akin.
Yan ang women. Kung dati ang lungkot ng mga mukha, after being able to learn such things in the modules that we have learned, parang nagkakaroon ng ngiti sa labi at nagkakaroon sila ng pag-asa. Yes, we are going to do this because nobody will do this for me but me.
Unfpa, addressing the reproductive health and protection needs of women and girls, even in emergencies.
So, before we go for tea, coffee, and snacks, I'd like to ask Yoriko maybe to come back and just say a few. If you just want to stand here and use the
Before I close, I wanted to recognize, in addition to the government of Australia, another very important partner in our humanitarian assistance activities, which is the government of Japan, represented here by a colleague from the embassy. I was thinking as I listened to the young women in the panel that this morning before I came, I saw, actually on Facebook, somebody had posted an interview recorded with Bertrand Russell about lessons he had learned from his life. And he mentioned that the most important lesson he had learned was that love is always wise and hate is always foolish. And I was thinking that the air around us, so to speak, is really dominated these days with news about hate and people who have chosen that path of hate, whether in engaging in armed conflict or acts of terrorism. And in that sense, I think our panelists are showing us that it's possible to choose the path of love. And also showing us that love isn't just this romantic sentiment that is born naturally or spontaneously, but that it's an act of will. It's an act of effort to exercise that empathy and put ourselves in the place of others who are different than us, whether they're Taliban fighters or people who are victims of natural disasters or armed conflict, people who are in different circumstances than ours. And that it's possible to make that effort under really difficult circumstances and to sustain it and to persevere. And so I would really like to thank you for that message and that inspiration. And also, I would like for us to take that inspiration and apply it to, because when you say love, it sounds nice and poetic, but the difficult part is to sustain that and to apply it to the really prosaic and boring efforts of day-to-day life in our work, including things like what I mentioned, getting governments, including donor governments, to spend more than that 5% in preventive efforts, or to get parliamentarians and people in the executive branches to assign more than the 3% of GDP that they're spending in developing countries in health. And that takes, really a tiring and tiresome and boring work of, in our day-to-day lives of calculating those budgets and going to talk to people again and again to get that percentage up even just a little bit. And then to spend that money in the right way and in effective ways so that it reaches the people that really need those resources. So that's hard, and it's something that can't just be moved forward on pure inspiration. It's effort, it's hard work. So, but I think today was a real, it was really special to listen to you and to take that inspiration with us. And I hope we can remember that in our day-to-day lives and in our day-to-day work. And thank you so much for being here.